Good evening, folks. I'm Linda Fink from the Biology and Environmental Program, but really I'm here tonight because I am one of Allie's Iditarod groupies. How many of you consider yourselves Allie groupies?
I got this down.
So, when the Sweet Briar community heard in the fall that Alison Lifka was going to be running the Iditarod, a number of us got very excited about it, and we definitely became groupies to the extent that some members of the Sweet Briar community traveled to Alaska to cheer her on. We also knew, when we knew that Allie was running the Iditarod, that we needed to get her here to campus because we wanted to hear this story from the dog's mouth, or the dog's musher's mouth. So I'm very grateful to Sweet Briar's Lecture and Events Committee, which funded Allie's visit here this week. So thank you to that faculty staff committee. Allie came to Sweet Briar from North Carolina, and she spent 4 years here majoring in environmental science. She had a very strong academic career, was on the dean's list most of the time, all the time. I was very fortunate to have Allie in some of my classes, and I can attest to the fact that she was a wonderful student, and it was great to have her in class. What Allie really liked was being outside, so sometimes she was outside in environmental classes or biology classes. Sometimes she was outside hiking on the Blue Ridge or anywhere else she could hike. And sometimes she was outside on the soccer field because Allie was a 4-year varsity athlete on the soccer team. And she was the captain of the team in her senior year. And she won the Sweet Briar's Chrysler Award, which is an award we give to seniors who are 4-year athletes who, I wrote this down, have demonstrated continuous commitment, sportsmanship, and achievement in sport. So Allie was quite an athlete before she got this idea that she wanted to run 1,000 miles behind 14 dogs. I don't know how much credit we at Sweet Briar can take for any of Allie's accomplishments, but I sure hope we can take at least a little bit. And I was pleased to read in the interview Allie gave with our communications people in the fall, in a question and answer, she said, quote, "There is a steel edge and resiliency to my quiet determinedness. This is very much thanks to Sweet Briar. My professors, soccer coaches, and peers taught me the value of the strength of women and pride in doing something not quite the norm." So with great pride in being part of Allie's Iditarod groupie group, I'm delighted to bring her here to speak to us this evening.
Hi guys, welcome. So first off, you'll have to forgive me if I seem a bit uncomfortable up here. Running dogs 1,000 miles across the wilderness of Alaska seems a lot more accomplishable for me than speaking to you guys today. Dog mushers are generally a more reserved group who enjoy the solitude of the wilderness with their dogs than public speaking. So I think Molly said when she walked in, she was like, I think this will be the most I've ever heard you talk, and it's probably true.
Just relax. You're not here to frighten you at all.
What, you're not going to bite? There you go. So a month ago, I was only a few days into a 2-week journey across the wilderness of Alaska when I found myself stranded 15 miles from the last checkpoint and 60 miles to the next checkpoint. 13 pairs of dog eyes were looking at me like, what now? And I was looking at a sled missing a chunk of a runner. I wasn't ready to throw in the towel, so I took a deep breath, and I determinedly decided I would figure out a way to get the next 60 miles with an unrunnable sled, no matter what. So what was I doing in the middle of nowhere with 13 dogs? By a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the Iditarod? Woo, that makes it easy. So I guess you've heard of dog mushing then. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on dog mushing and Iditarod before I plunge into the epic adventure that I went on 2 weeks ago. So, dog mushing. It's where a crazy person gets on a sled and hooks up 14 really energetic dogs and tells them to go, and go they do. Your team can range from anywhere from 6 to 16 dogs generally, but honestly you could hook up one dog and they'd pull you down the trail. And then the way they're connected is you've got a harness that they wear. They're connected to a line that we call a tug line. And then they pull off of that, off a central line that they're all connected to. So all these dogs are connected together, but you'll notice there's no reins, there's no leash. So it's a lot of trust between you and your dogs. It's all voice commands. So you got to trust those dogs. The voice commands you typically use are go, stop, left, right. One I'd like them to know a little better is easy. They don't listen to that one so much. And you're really dependent on what's called your lead dogs. So your lead dogs are your front dogs. Hollywood typically depicts a single lead dog, but generally I prefer running with 2 dogs up front. They can depend on each other and work as a partnership. There was a point in the race where I had only one dog who wanted to be up there, so I did have a single lead dog for a little bit. So the positions, you've got lead dog, then you got right behind them, you got swing dogs. So swing dogs are like your backup lead dogs. If your lead dogs are struggling a little bit, generally your swing dogs will help direct the team as well. Then you got your team dogs. So they're just important because you need dogs. And then you got your wheel dogs. And your wheel dogs are something I consider very important that some mushers neglect. Not every dog can be a good wheel dog. It takes a lot of strength, a lot of mental fortitude, and an ability of getting kind of beaten up because you're right next to the sled, and the sled has a tendency to jerk them around a little bit. So you need a really strong dog. And I had a lot of young dogs step up into that position this year, and I was incredibly proud of their ability to run back there. So up front, I have a lot of the common gear that you need to be a dog musher. So first things first are the dog stuff. So you got dog booties. So this is what they wear on their feet. They're super cute. But if you've ever tried to put anything on your dog, you'll realize it's not very easy. So imagine putting 4 booties on 14 dogs, sometimes 3 times a day. So hopefully none. This is what's protecting their feet. I'll pass these around, but you'll notice there's no insulation. There's not a lot to them. It's just a piece of fabric and some Velcro. And they're not for warmth. So these dogs have incredibly well-built feet. So they've got a lot of fur, and they're bred so that their feet are capable of handling really rough conditions. But there's only so much abuse that they can take. So these help protect their feet from the snow and the ice. And you'll notice there's a little bit of a powder to the inside the boot, and that's Gold Bond Blue. So it helps with friction, and it helps so that moisture doesn't build up in there and cause issues. They do, but it's a bit of an art form to be able to put them on properly. The other really important thing is their harnesses. So the harnesses they wear is what determines basically their whole ability to pull. So if you have a harness that doesn't fit them right, or they're not pulling right in it, they're not going to be happy. And my job is to have happy dogs. So we have 3 different types that we use at the kennel I work at. So we've got this one, which is the one that I use to race in. I call it the howling dog, but that's just a brand. But the style is called a halfback, so it stops halfway down their back. So this is their head, and it stops halfway. The other really common harness used is a full-length harness, so it goes all the way down their back. And this one has a little bit more pulling power, but it also has more of a tendency to kind of chafe sometimes over long distances, and that's why I prefer the shorter one, is it doesn't chafe as bad. And then there's a third style that's over there on the chair, and that's just another halfback style that I used on a couple of the dogs I ran. You'll notice that the front dog in this picture here is wearing that style. He's on our left, he's on the right of the team though. And one of the final pieces of equipment for the dogs are a dog coat. So even though that these dogs are bred for cold temperatures, they still like a coat when it's cold. So on this race, it was really warm, so I only had to use these when we were resting. When they were running, they were able to stay almost too warm. It was so warm to the point where I was actually more worried about them overheating on this race. But every time I stopped, I'd be putting coats on every single dog. And then this guy, I call it a pecker wrapper, but it's to protect the boys' privates. So, and I have two different styles. I've got a lighter weight one and a heavier weight one. So I've got different dogs with varying coat lengths. Then for me, I wear layers upon layers upon layers. I think at the coldest I wear probably about 5 layers on my legs and about 5 layers up top. For my hands, I'm wearing 3 layers. I've got liner gloves if I need to do anything with the dogs. I'm always wearing something on my hands. Then I've got these fleece gloves that I'll wear on top of that. And then these beauties. So these are called Beaver Mitts, and they are made out of Alaskan beaver. And you almost need fur to survive up there. It's an unfortunate reality, but that's what's going to keep you warm. So they're made really big so that they can fit over everything that you're wearing. And I can pass these around if you're really nice to them. So you'll notice that there's a liner system to them. And I sewed them myself. So the easiest way to do it is just make them yourself. The other piece of fur equipment I have that I brought is my Sealskin Hat. A native made it for me. You can't make anything out of seal unless you're a native, but it's the same thing. You need it to survive up there when it's really cold. And then, because we don't ever sleep, we have to run at night a lot. And also it's dark in Alaska. So the other really key piece of equipment is a headlamp. So this is my headlamp system. It connects to a big battery pack, and this gets super bright. I could probably see 100 yards down the trail with it. And I attached it to a ball cap so that if it's snowing or blowing at all, the ball cap will protect me from the elements. And then this yellow coat, I didn't bring my big parka because it was a little bit too big to fit in my carry-on. But this yellow jacket is actually what I wore for the most part on this race because it was so warm. It's actually a wind coat. So I experienced a lot of wind, and it helped protect me from the wind this year. So the dogs, my favorite part. I'm sure your favorite part too. So how many of you guys have dogs? So how hard is it to take care of one dog? I take care of 50 dogs. More specifically, on a day-to-day basis, I'm taking care of 27 dogs. During the race, I was taking care of 14 dogs, thankfully. It was a down. It was a little bit easier only taking care of 14. So yeah, there's a lot of care that's put into these dogs. They're highly spoiled athletes. They get fed a very rich diet of high-performance dry kibble with a lot of meat. So they get fed fish, they get fed beef, they get fed lots and lots of fat. So sled dogs are really efficient at processing fat. They can take in like 60% of their diet being fat, I believe. So very incredible athletes. Most of the sled dogs that we have in Alaska are called Alaskan Huskies. Most of you know sled dogs as being like Siberian Huskies. And they make really good sled dogs too, but they're not quite as enthusiastic. They're more of a mellow sled dog. So the Alaskan Huskies are more preferred in the racing circuit. And they're a mixed breed, so they're kind of a mix of anything anybody thought would help make the breed better. So it started off as being like mixes of like the original Siberians that look very different than our current day Siberians, mixed with the native village dogs, and then mixed with whatever dogs that the gold miners brought up to Alaska. In recent years, they started breeding in more hounds and other high-speed dog breeds that aren't really great for the cold, but they bred them to the Alaskan Husky so that you could get the speed with the endurance and strength of the Husky. So that's why you'll see some of my dogs are super fluffy like this guy, this darker guy, and then some of them aren't quite as fluffy like this gray and white guy. So this guy's Patat, the darker guy, And he was one of my young dogs this year and did phenomenal. And then Quantum, the gray guy, is one of my lead dogs for the race. And unfortunately, I had to leave him at the very last checkpoint because he started getting a little bit sore and tired. So he got to go home a little bit early. So we do breed our own dogs. We don't just go get whatever dog we find off at the pound. So we're breeding for athleticism, we're breeding for drive, we're breeding for attitude, health, and appetite, and coat. So all these things are really important when looking for a good sled dog.
So you know the parents?
Yes. Yeah, it's like, I would imagine like with horses, where you're very carefully monitoring their genealogy. And there are certain lines that are preferred. Generally, though, it's based on performance. So like a musher does really well for years and years and years, and a certain dog is always on their team, that dog will become desirable to breed to. And then the really important thing that I find incredible is how they form as a team. So not just with me, but with each other. So when I started in the fall, I just had a bunch of dogs, and by February I had a team. They worked together, they moved together, they knew each other. Quantum, this guy, the gray and white guy, he got brought in a little bit later into the team. I was a little short lead dogs, and I was lent him from my boss. I had been running him the last 3 years, but he hadn't been training with this group of dogs. So I knew him really well, but my team didn't. And it was really entertaining for me the first 300 miles. Anytime anything would happen, they would blame him. They're like, "It's your fault." And you'd be like, "Leave me alone." So, but as we went down the trail, they accepted him into the group, and he became very much a part of our team. Let's see. Oh, so fun fact, I can recognize every single bark in the 50-dog kennel that I work at. So I have a cabin that's just probably 20 feet off of the kennel, and a dog will start barking, and I'll be like, "Darn it, Sriracha, why are you barking again?" And it's really important to recognize your dogs, because there's certain dogs that will bark at anything, and there's certain dogs that if they're barking, you know that there's something wrong. So they're my life. And let's see, which segues into the bond that I form with these guys. So this dog in the top left corner is Parrot. She was one of my lead dogs. I formed a really incredible bond with her this winter. She's a bit shy like me, so I definitely sympathized with her. And she wasn't really a lead dog before this year. And my boss was like, "No, you shouldn't take her. She's not a lead dog." And I was like, "I'm taking her. She's my go-to dog." And she really stepped up for me this year. She led me through some of the gnarliest stretches of trail without a hesitation. And she led me underneath the finish line. And then this is Nina. She's one of my little girls. And she's just the happiest-go-lucky dog. And she'll jump into my arms and give me kisses. In fact, she'll probably try to give me a black eye.
You laugh? Her sisters gave me a black eye and a fat lip.
And then this is Parrot and Rambler at the finish line with me. So you can't, in my opinion, you can't just step on a dog team and expect to get them to know. You need that bond. You need that trust. They need to trust you. You need to trust them. And I think that because I had such a great relationship with these dogs was why I was able to make it to know. So this is my kennel that I work at. You'll notice that every dog has their own house, and they are tethered. I know in recent years there's been some negative light shown on how mushers keep their dogs. From what I've seen and experienced, these dogs are very well taken care of. They are on their tethers probably a quarter of the day. The tether is kind of like a stall for a horse. It enables us to feed them. It enables us to take care of them on a one-to-one basis. It allows us to socialize with only one at one time. They are fed an incredible diet. They are the healthiest dogs I've ever seen, and they're incredibly happy. So the Iditarod. We sure are crazy to want to do it. So just quick, the Iditarod is technically a National Historic Trail. It runs from Seward to Nome, and it was an old mail trail that the miners used in the gold rush. And it was turned into a historic trail when Joe Reddington Sr. and Dorothy Page decided to use it to preserve the sled dogs and the history of Alaska. The trail was really important in settling and just exploring Alaska in general. So this is the map from Seward to Nome, and the dog race only runs from Willow to Nome, I think mostly because of the lack of snow. And also it's become very developed in the Anchorage area, so it would be very dangerous to run the dogs through that section. When the Iditarod first started, I thought I had it tough, but when they first started, people didn't think they would be able to make it to Nome. And I'm honestly surprised some of them did, because they experienced no trail. They had to find their way to Nome. In comparison, I had a marked trail the whole way to Nome. I had little sticks every 100 yards with markers or big wooden tripods. And there were sections where I'd have to get off, where I couldn't see, and I'd get off and I'd look around and be like, okay, here it is, direct the dogs over, and we'd get going again. But those first guys running the Iditarod Trail the first few years were incredible explorers and tenacious individuals that I highly respect. So this is a pretty map of the Iditarod. So every year it switches routes. On even years they run what's called the northern route, so that's the red line. And on odd years, like this year, we run the southern route. The southern route's considered the more difficult route because it's less traveled by the locals. So Ophir all the way to Shagluk isn't traveled except for by us. There are what we call trail breakers that go out before the race, but if anything happens between them going through and us going through, it's on us. So that was one of my tougher runs, was from Ophir to Iditarod. And then Iditarod to Shagluk was pretty difficult as well. So it's a really long trail. The terrain varies immensely across the 1,000 miles. It's not just nice, straight, flat with snow. You start off on a river, then you climb up and over a big mountain range called the Alaskan Range. Then you get dropped down into this area that doesn't have any snow. And then from there you start hopping village to village until you get to Ophir. And then after you get through the hills to Iditarod and Shagluk, you start reconnecting with the local native villages again in Ambik. And you travel up the Yukon River to Kaltag, which is another native village. And then Kaltag to Eunuch is a historic portage trail for the natives. So they used it to trade between villages. And it was a big trade route. And then from there you're on the coast, and the coast is not flat. Every run except for one was through the hills. So I kept saying, oh, I just got to get to the coast. I just got to get to the coast. Yeah, no. Okay, so just for perspective, Alaska is the biggest state in the U.S. Very big. I think Alaska, California, there's like 3 really big states that can fit in. I don't know if all 3 of those could fit in there, but definitely California and Montana could fit in there. And then the red lines marks the Iditarod. For scale, imagine going from Sweet Briar to New York City. That's only 400 miles. Now go a little bit further, go to Chicago. It's only 700 miles. Okay, now go to Houston. That's more like what I just ran by dogs. Yeah. So, and it wasn't flat. So as I was, you okay there? So as I was describing on that map, there's villages and checkpoints along the way. They're really important because they allow you to resupply as you go. So on the top, you've got the checkpoint of Roan, which is a remote checkpoint, so it's not a village. It's just a cabin, and that's all it is. So the race has to do a lot of logistics to get that checkpoint ready for us. So they have to fly in drop bags, they have to fly in straw, they have to fly in fuel, they have to fly in the volunteers and all the volunteers things. They fly in tents, water, food. So we use whatever we can as checkpoints. The villages are the nicest checkpoints, but honestly I enjoyed the remote checkpoints better. So that was places like Roan and Eagle Island and Ophir. Let's see. Oh, at every checkpoint there is a team of veterinarians. You come in and they immediately are swarming your team, asking how every dog is doing, if you've noticed anything, if you have any concerns. And they're checking on a basis of HAL, so heart, attitude, weight, and lungs. That's their criteria for checking. And if there's any reason that the dog isn't performing well or isn't happy, they get what's called returned. So they'll get left in the care of the race staff, usually pampered, and then returned home to Anchorage for one of your crew to pick up. You're not required, what's that?
You don't get another dog?
Nope, there's no substitution. So that's why for most of the race I ran with 13 dogs. So in Roan, I think it's not quite 200 miles into the race, I had a dog that needed to go home. Let's see. Oh, you're not required to stop at any of these checkpoints. They're just resupplies for you. So I use them to resupply my food, my dog's food, dog booties, some medicines that I use to treat the dogs, like liniment, so you'll use it to massage the dogs, and foot cream. There are 3 places you do have to stop at a checkpoint. So you're required to stop for 24 hours in a checkpoint, you're required to stop for 8 hours in another checkpoint on the Yukon, and you're required to stop 8 hours in White Mountain. But outside of that, you don't have to stay at a checkpoint. I enjoyed staying at checkpoints. And then, so as we're going along, the checkpoints all have race volunteers, so it's run completely by volunteers, and they're extremely excited to see you. They get excited for the front as much as for the back as much as for the front, which I really appreciated. I expected, being in the back, that they'd be like, oh, whatever. But they still were like, yay, how was the trail? What was it like? You're doing incredible. And it's just like, thank you. I don't feel like it, but thank you. And then when you start getting into the villages, it's all natives. They live a very remote and sometimes subsidiary living. So it's really cool to talk to them and hear about their way of life and their perspective. The sad thing for me is that this sport started as an integral part of their life, and it's no longer a part of their life. It's too expensive. So that was really sad for me to see that almost nowhere in any of these villages was there a dog team. So the logistics. So this race is logistically very difficult for mushers and the race itself. I will get to that in a second, actually. So this is one of the vets checking Nina in Roan. So you'll notice him checking her heart rate. And then at most checkpoints, mushers will actually sleep with their dogs. You can go into a cabin if you like, but honestly, it's a lot more comfortable. Just curl up with your dogs. So logistics. So my logistics, the big one for me was getting all the drop bags ready. So these resupply bags. So in the resupply bags, it mostly has dog food. So you got kibble, you got different types of meat, and then you got human food, dog booties, you got what's called runner plastic. So your sled has 2 runners, and on that runner you're able to you have a piece of plastic that you can change out as it gets rough. Because as it gets rough, that has more friction and it slows you down. And it makes it harder for the dogs to pull. And then, like I said, resupply of healthcare items, then gloves. I sent out gloves to every checkpoint, and I was very excited because they get wet, and then they're not very warm. Yeah, and then anything else you can think of that might get depleted. So I sent out heat packs that I didn't use, and neck gaiters that I didn't use, because it was warm. At one point it was like 40, 45 degrees, so like it is today. And that's warm for a sled dog.
And then I'm sure you drop off any trash that you had accumulated. You have to keep all the trash, keep the trail clean
Yeah, but you're able to throw it away at checkpoints.
at the check.
Yeah. And that is a really big thing that the race really wants mushers to be aware of, because it is a historic trail. There is a trail sweep that theoretically picks up, but they shouldn't need to pick up our trash. So in my drop bags, I ship 1,900 pounds of food and gear out. It's pretty common for mushers to send anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 pounds. And they get, it is through the mail. It's through USPS.
That's awesome.
How long did it take to get to all those places?
Well, the race holds on to them in a refrigerated van until probably the week of the race, and then they get shipped out to what's called hubs, so it's the bigger villages. And then from the bigger villages, they're able to fly them out in smaller planes or snow machine them out to the checkpoints. So it's a huge endeavor just to get the mushers gear out, but then there's everything else. So you need the straw for the dogs, you need the fuel that we use to resupply for our cookers. You need everything for the volunteers. You need to get the staff out. And then these drop bags are turned in February, thankfully, because I couldn't imagine doing this the week of the race. So that's all my drop bags. And they got packed. So when you go to turn them in, it's a huge affair because you got 52 people descending with 20 checkpoints of gear. So there's 20 checkpoints, typically 3 bags for checkpoint, and 52 mushers. A lot of bags. So they have quite the system for keeping it organized. So there's one of the planes with some of the gear getting sent out. The blue bags is bales of straw. So we use that straw when we're resting the dog to insulate them from the snow. So why would I want to do this? Good question. So I discovered the joy of running dogs my first winter in Alaska. It's really hard to describe what it feels like to stand on the back of the sled and watch dogs do something that they enjoy. So if anybody's seen a golden retriever fetch a ball, it's about like that with the sled dogs with running. They get super excited. They're really into it. And it's just really infectious to watch that joy. Another thing is I've always been very adventuresome. I grew up backpacking, kayaking, horseback riding. I loved being in the outdoors, and this was just a new way of exploring. So it really called to me. Also really loved animals. Grew up trying to bring every animal I possibly could home, to my parents' chagrin. So this just seemed like the right thing. I get to go explore, and I get to do it with 14 of my best friends. So going into this race, I had very specific goals. I wanted to have fun, and I wanted my dogs to have fun. And I didn't want to get to know them without that. I wanted them to be healthy, and I wanted them to be happy, because it was all about them for me. And honestly, I wanted to have a life-altering experience. I wanted some big event to kind of show all the work I had put into running dogs. And I also wanted to take the next step in dog care and dog mushing. Because you can train every day, you can go run a dog team, but there's nothing like running a dog team every day to running a dog team across 1,000 miles of the wilderness. On our trails that we train every day, they're perfect, they're perfectly groomed. The worst thing that can happen is you can encounter a moose. Whereas when I was running down the Iditarod trail, there's no trail that you could ever find that would mimic it. It's difficult, it's challenging, it makes you question your sanity, and I want to go back for more. So, it took a lot to get there. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and decided, I'm going to run Iditarod. So it started off just by discovering dog mushing. So I got the opportunity by chance, started running dogs. I did want to do it but I didn't really know how to do it, and I just got lucky. I met somebody that was looking for help with their sled dogs that winter. From that, I was able to find a full-time job working summer and winter with them. I gave tours on a glacier to tourists, and I got to stay with my dogs year-round. And from there, I got addicted. And I got introduced to racing. So day-to-day training is a lot of fun, but when you get to go out, it's like hiking versus backpacking. So you get to hike, but at the end of the day, it's done. Whereas when you're backpacking, you get to live and breathe it. And for some of you, that might seem not very appealing, but I love it. I love just completely immersing myself in something. It's very simple. You got to run to the next checkpoint. You got to take care of your dogs. You got to eat and you got to sleep, and everything else just melts away. So in the fall of 2017, I asked the guy I was working for if I could run a group of his dogs in Iditarod, and he said yes. And from that point on, I didn't really believe it was going to happen. I thought that something would happen that would prevent it from not occurring, but here I am. So 2017 I spent getting ready. I had to do these races called qualifiers. So you had to prove to the Iditarod that you're capable of running 1,000 miles. So you have to do 200 to 300 mile races, and you have to do 3 of them. And you have to perform well enough, both in dog care, ability to take care of yourself, and just your standings in the race to prove that you're a good candidate for the Iditarod. So not any Joe can walk off and be like, I can do the Iditarod. So I had to prove that I could be an Iditarod musher.
I take it the judges were previous Iditarod racers themselves, probably.
Definitely experienced dog mushers. I don't know if, there's also another race called the Yukon Quest, so they could have been veterans of that race as well. And then last fall was when I dove into the preparation for the race with my team. So we started in September and started training with 4-wheelers. So there's no snow in Alaska until about November, December. So until that point, we have to think snow and run at night when it's cool. And we hook them to a 4-wheeler because running dogs on a sled in the dirt is scary, let me tell you. So some of the things I was training for was to have the dogs experience as much as possible that they would experience on the trail. So the most obvious thing is I had to condition them. They had to learn how to run long distances. So I was working with very young dogs. So the longest they had run before I started training was 10 miles. I had to get them to a point where they could run 40 miles. So it's just like training for a marathon. You start slow, you start easy, and you work up. So this is a calendar from January, and you'll notice it's pretty busy. And at this point, they were rocking it out. They were like, no problem. But we started slow. Other things we're focusing on in training is camping. So when you get on a Iditarod, they're not coming home. And if that's what you do in training, they're going to expect to come home, come to a warm doghouse with a warm meal, and go to sleep for 12 hours. So you got to teach them how to run 40 miles, eat a meal, sleep, get up, and run another 40 miles. And the amazing thing is it doesn't take them long. They're just like, this is incredible. Let's keep going. So you had a question? I'm going to get to that in just a second. Yep. So then recovery time, that's sleeping. They have to learn how to sleep. My first camping trip with these group of dogs, they spent the entire 4 hours playing with each other. They're like, yay, this is great. They learned pretty fast to go to sleep when we stopped. And then just all this training helps build the cohesive team. They learn to trust each other. They learn to trust me. Yep. And then, like I said before, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a lifestyle. You're living and breathing sled dogs. So even my day off, I'm still right there in the kennel. I'm still taking care of dogs. It's just not running dogs that day. They're taking a break, I'm taking a break, but still all about the dogs. So some more of the logistics. You don't have to just train your dogs. You have to get everything else ready. So I had to build a way to transport the dogs. So I had access to a trailer, so I built these boxes to transport them in the trailer to races and to vet checks and whatever I needed to transport them for. I ended up using it to transport it for some training when we got some rain in the middle of the winter and our trails got really dangerous, so I traveled further north with them. And then these dog coats, I had to alter them so that they worked with my harness system. So they're made for full-length harnesses, and I had to make them able to run with half-back harnesses. So that's me sewing harnesses, oh joy. So then the drop bags, like I was describing before. Most of us describe it as the marathon before the marathon. And then most importantly is just the support of everybody. So there at the kennel, you got the support of each other. Then you've got the support of your friends and your family. And then I had the lovely support of the Sweet Briar community this year.
Every year.
Okay, so to answer your question, human food. So I thankfully learned from the best. The guy I learned from has run Iditarod 25 times. So he has a lot of experience, and he told me human food is essential to make sure that you have really good food. So I spent a long time cooking lots of meals that I thought I would eat when I'm dead tired. And I'm not a picky eater. I will eat almost anything. But as soon as you get tired, all you can think about is I just want to go to bed. So I needed to make meals that when I was dead tired, I was like, that looks good, I'm going to eat that. So that's me cooking, which if you know me, I don't cook. And then because it's theoretically cold, you're able to just make any meal you want and freeze it. So you vacuum seal it. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. And then this is me and the young lady who helped me train the dogs this year, Magda, with all the food I was sending out on the trail. So that's all the human food. And then more human food.
Those would go in your drop bags. You
Yeah.
didn't have to carry it with you.
No. Yeah, so that was one of the things I could resupply. So I sent out snacks as well. So that, if you can just kind of skim through, that was some of the stuff that I sent out food-wise. So snacks were kind of like my backup if any of my meals went bad, and I ended up relying heavily on them this year because it was so warm, my meals were going a little bit bad. Then the dog food. So the dogs get spoiled. So you'll notice the two of us are at what's called a meat bandsaw. We process meat on this. We cut 50-pound blocks into French-sized sticks so that they're easy to eat for the dogs. And that takes most of the time of prepping the drop bags. I think I cut about 900 pounds of meat on that saw. So the food we'll feed them is kibble. This Caribou Creek Gold is a performance, high-performance kibble that you honestly should not feed your pet dog. It's extremely high in fat and protein, and your dog will get obese on it. And then we feed them beef, salmon, rendered chicken fat, and then beef fat mixed with cooked fish were the things I sent out. So just like how I get tired and don't really want to eat, the dogs have the same problem. So we like to have variety so that it's like, oh, not this today, okay, that. On the trip, my dogs really liked the kibble, the salmon, the rendered chicken fat, and to a degree the beef fat.
So every other night it would be something different, or would you do like 3 days of the same thing and then 3 days?
No, honestly, I just varied it up. So like what I ended up falling into is soaking the beef in warm water and then adding kibble, so it kind of creates like a stew mush of sorts. And then I'd feed that in checkpoints when I first got in. And then later on I'd feed kind of just like a kibble water with frozen meat. And then on the trail I'd snack them salmon.
You're probably going to answer this, but can you tell us about the water and how often you'd have to let them drink water?
Yeah, so the sled dogs don't really like clear water. It's a big struggle. This year I was able to get clear water into them if I gave it to them right away. So I'd come into a checkpoint, get clear water, and put kibble in it, and then they would drink it. But yeah, I struggled. They would tip the bowl, eat the kibble, and then go eat snow, which my impression is just dehydrates them more. It's very frustrating.
How many calories would they consume in a day on a race like this?
Sometimes like 15,000 calories.
And how many would you consume with the cold and all the...
I think I've heard it quoted as maybe 3,000. I'm not sure. I don't think this year we were burning that much. It was really warm, like I was saying before. I was sweating most of the time. It was terrible.
So maybe once or twice a day? Or?
So you're trying to get as many mini meals into them as possible. So it's better to feed them lots of little amounts over the course of the day than like big meals. It's better for their metabolism to just constantly have. So it's generally every 3 hours you're giving them something, even if it's just a small piece of fish. The other thing is we have to go through health checks with the dogs. So you have to do a vet check where you have a head-to-toe exam. Then you have to do EKG, so that's where they monitor their heart. And then they also get a full panel blood test. So these are all to make sure that the dogs are healthy enough to even participate in the race. So like I said before, the support crew was immense for me. So this is some of the mushergrams I received from you guys, which was absolutely incredible. I remember the first place I got them was in Eunuch. I showed up, I get a big boxes of pizza, and I get the stack of mushergrams, and I just got this warm feeling inside of, I can do it. And then this is some of the people that were at the finish line cheering me on when I came in. So we got my parents, my close friend Cheryl, my boss and his wife, and then the host family who let me stay in their home when I was in Nome. And then this is the Sweet Briar group that came to the start. I was a little nervous that day. So it was really cool to have that support. What?
Only until we got you on the sled.
Yeah, as soon as I got on the sled, I was fine. Okay, so ready or not? So this is the list of all the checkpoints and the mileage. So most of them aren't that far apart. So I was able to just jump checkpoint to checkpoint. The goal with my dogs was to run no more than 40 miles or no longer than 6 hours, depending on which came first. So I rested a lot, and there were also stretches that were longer than that, so I had to camp. So that's where you pull off to the side of the trail, you pull out straw, you bed down the dogs, you feed them, you rest for a certain amount of time. Typically I was resting an hour longer than what I ran was my goal. Got a little bit longer than that at the end due to exhaustion, but I got there. So the very first day, I was a nervous wreck. I didn't sleep the night before, I couldn't eat that morning, and I couldn't stop shaking the day of the race. And I was just like, what the heck, I don't feel nervous. I feel excited. But I had never felt like that before, and it kind of threw me off my game a little bit to start with, but as soon as I hit the trail, everything fell into place, and it was all good. So the very first part of the trail is along a river heading towards a big mountain. And for the most part, this section was pretty uneventful. It was really pretty. The weather was still nice. I don't really honestly remember much from this stretch because it just, everything flowed. Nothing was a big deal. It was very pretty though. Next came heading into the mountains. Unfortunately, this is not me. This is one of my fellow mushers. This is one of what's called the steps. So it's a series of 3 drops, and they're notorious for tangling up dog teams. So as you head off the river and up into the mountains, the trail becomes very technical. I ran this in the dark. I don't know if that was good or not.
You made it.
Yeah.
You made it. That's the important thing.
I think it was probably good because I couldn't see what was going to come at me. I ended up making it through fine. Honestly, the hardest part for me wasn't the terrain. It was everybody that went before me had their breakdown, and all the snow went whee. So it was. I was in a big trench, probably up to mid-thigh, and it was really tricky navigating my sled through that. It kept wanting to catch up.
Had gone through it,
Yep.
the people ahead of you went through the same
Yep. Yep. So it was just really hard. I got the hang of it by the end. It was a little bit like surfing, like the sled would pop up on one side and I'd just be like, okay, let's see.
Are you attached to the sled in any manner?
Nope. So you got your handlebar and then you're standing on runners. So the first rule of dog mushing is don't let go. Second rule of dog mushing, don't let go. Third rule of dog mushing, don't let go. This is my team resting at the checkpoint of Finger Lake.
Would you reuse the hay?
Nope. So they resupply it at every checkpoint for you. The only thing is if I knew I was going to camp between, I would have to carry it. Yep. So yep, that's my team resting, basking in the sun while it lasted. The mountains. I loved this section. I am a mountain girl. I had heard horror stories, and honestly, this was one of my favorite sections. So you climb up and over through Ptarmigan and Rainy Pass, and you get spectacular views like this. There's mountains all around you. When I went through, it was blowing snow, and I couldn't really see, but I really appreciated the views it gave me. And then the backside, you come down this river gorge. And I really want to go back just to that section because it was these huge cliff walls and then you're just winding through. You see how long this line is, right? So you're attached to this line that's, what is that, like 30 yards, 40 yards? And you're having to maneuver your sled through these winding trails. And honestly, I love a little bit of an adrenaline rush. And it was a massive adrenaline rush. And I rode that high. So that's climbing up to Rainy Pass. So that's the whiteout blizzard little storm I went through. There were sections that my lead dogs couldn't find the trail and we had to kind of zigzag around until we found it. That's not the gorge, but that was similar to what the gorge looked like. That was the very bottom. And then that's popping out the other side onto another river and looking back at what I just came through. This is me and Roan. Oh, I forgot to say. So going up and over that pass there, because we had had such warm weather, the creeks weren't frozen. So sled dogs don't like water. They're not like labs and golden retrievers. They don't like water. So I had to hop off my sled, be like, okay, Rambler. Okay, Quahog, let's go off the creek, and I'd take them, and I'd have to encourage them across, and as soon as they were across, then they could help me pull the rest of the team across. But because I had to hop in the creek, I ended up with very wet feet, and you can kind of see the snow-encrusted boots. But it wasn't a big deal. It was warm. Yep. The other exciting part, the only part where I actually felt terrified going through the gorge, was there was a section where you pop out of the trees. There's a big ice shelf right next to a creek, and you curved right back into the trees. And as you can imagine, that force of getting whipped around kind of makes you spin around. And when you hit ice, the sled just tipped, and my sled starts flying towards a big gaping hole in a creek that's 4 feet down. And I'm looking at it like, this won't be fun. Every sled is equipped with what's called a snow hook. It's what you use to stop your team and hold them in place. By some miracle, it popped out of its holster, caught on an edge of the ice, and slammed my team to a halt. And I was like, if there is a God, thank you. And then it took me about 5 minutes to actually get the sled upright because the ice was so slippery that every time I went to pick it up, it slipped, I slipped, and the dogs are just looking at me like, what are you doing?
How heavy is your sled?
The sled's probably 200 pounds. Yeah. So that's me relaxing after going through the gorge. So that's the checkpoint of Roan. So leaving Roan, the snow disappeared. So you go about 50 yards through the trees, so you can kind of see Roan's in the trees. So you go through the trees, there's still snow. pop out on the river and it's just glare ice and gravel bars. It's not very fun to run dogs on. Your sled is very hard to control and your dogs are like, hey, there's no resistance, let's go faster. So we went really fast. Thankfully I hit a patch of snow and was able to take a breather here before so that's some of the ice and gravel bars, before we did this. So this section of trail is called the Burn. Years ago it was burnt out by a wildfire and it's just kind of how it's known now. It's grown mostly back, but it's notorious for not having snow. And this year there was about 4 miles without snow and it felt like 50. I've never been beaten up so much behind a dog team.
What did you do?
What's that?
Would you stop and walk, or?
No,
Does it make a difference?
there was one section, it was up a vertical hill. The hill was glare ice, and the dogs were just slipping and sliding. So I got up. I have a line that I can connect. I hooked the line up to the lead dogs. There's like a loop at the end, and I hooked my leash to that, and I helped pull the dogs up, or I helped pull the sled up. But for the most part, they were able to pull just fine in this. It was more about me keeping the sled upright and not losing the team. There was a lot of sled tipping, me leaping onto the sled and saying, whoa, 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 until they stopped, which sometimes took a while. Which leads to my biggest challenge at the beginning of the race. So about 15 miles after leaving Roan, I'm coming down one of those lovely hills without any snow on it through the Burn. And I lose control of the sled because you need a little bit of backward force to be able to steer the sled properly. It drifts off just a little bit to the side where there's a stump at the bottom of the hill, and I slam right into it. I hear the crack. I look, I see it's broken. I look at my dogs and I say, all right, let's keep going. Went another mile, did a reality check and was like, I got to deal with this. So I pulled over to the side. I got the dogs curled up in it was kind of like a spongy tundra at that point. There was no snow, so I didn't really have to bed them down with anything. I did have straw because I was planning on camping, but I conserved that for a later camp because I didn't think this would take very long. I took a look at the sled, took a deep breath. I said, I can do this. Went and chopped down a dead spruce tree, splinted my sled, as you can see in this picture, as best I could. And then what really saved me was I have what's called ski wideners. So it displaces the weight of the sled on the front. So they attach to the very front of the sled. So on the right there's the front. And they displace the weight. So I was able to use this as a patch. So this is what kept me going. So I love this piece of plastic like no other. This first patch only got me about 15 miles before it failed. And what failed was I used a zip tie. My bad. Yeah, that was the first point after the sled breaking where I was like, I might not make it. So I was in the woods, I pulled the team into the woods and was in the process of pulling my broken sled off the trail, grumbling heavily. It's also blowing, so it's like 20-mile-an-hour wind at this point. So it's not very pleasant out. And about that point, another musher comes along. His name is Jeremy. And I'm like, I flag him down. I'm feeling kind of in the dumps at this point, 60 miles away from my next checkpoint and the potential for another sled. So I ask him, I'm like, hey, do you have any ideas? My first patch failed. Anything. And it turns out he builds sleds for a living. Yay! So he takes a look and he's like, hey, you've got a really good thing going on there. You just need a little bit of adjustment. And so what he suggested was, instead of using a zip tie, is actually using a more permanent solution. But that required a little bit of work. It required heating this piece of plastic over fire, melting the plastic, slowly scraping it away, creating a groove in the plastic, then making holes so that I could bolt it onto my sled. That took me a while. So, innovation, it's very important. Also determinedness, or determination. I actually got a good nap before I did all that. I was pretty tired, pretty downhearted, and that's what you do. When you're that exhausted, you just take a nap. So I curled up with my dogs after feeding them and feeding myself. Took a 3-hour nap, woke up, and started scraping. But it got me to Nikolai. And I was one happy musher to see Nikolai. In Nikolai, a very kind woman that I was friends with from the summer named Shani had decided to scratch, and she lent me her sled. So I was able to leave my broken, trusty sled behind. I was very sad to see it go, but I was also not sad to see it go. So I drove Shani's sled to Takatna, but ended up switching to another friend of mine's sled that had a seat. Because at that point I hurt really badly and I wanted a seat. So there's a couple different styles of sled. So the sled I drove was a stand-up. You can also have one that has like a little seat behind you that you can sit down on. So that's about the size of the runner that was broken off. So there's a big gaping hole where that stick is. So you can imagine that created a lot of drag. This is the section of trail that the burn is in. I think that's Egypt Mountain. And there's kind of like a, I think it's called rain shadow effect in that area where it doesn't get a lot of precipitation. So the next section after that seemed like a breeze. Nothing really big happened. So Nikolai to McGrath was super fast trail for me. Got to see a lot of friendly faces in McGrath as everybody else was 24ing there, so I got to see lots of mushers that I didn't see until Nome. And then I ran to Takatna where I took my 24. And I took my 24 there because they had pie. Endless supplies of pie. So this is the village of Takatna, and this is the teams resting. My team is the second one on the left side. This is Takatna from the air, so you can see the really small little communities. This is Shani's sled. And then this is me packing the next sled, getting ready to go. And this is me leaving Takatna. So you can see the seat behind me on that sled. And you can see these dogs really want to go. The next section wasn't as easy. It started off fine. There was snow. It was soft. It was slow, but there was snow. About 20 miles outside of Iditarod, which was the checkpoint I was trying to get to, the snow disappears. And unlike the burn, this time it had tussocks. So tussocks are big clumps of grass that are really fun to bounce off of. Apparently that's my only picture of it. And the dogs actually had a really hard time navigating in this section. I think the teams in front of us had taken multiple routes. And what your lead dogs are doing when they're looking for a route is they're following scent trails. So I have it lucky being in the back. I have scent trails to follow. The teams in the front are laying that scent. So it's a little bit harder for them, but they made my life out by going lots of different ways. So there were sections where I relied heavily on Quantum and Rambler to listen to me for their G-Haw commands. And they did phenomenal. So this is while there was still snow. The big tripod there is one of the ways they mark the trail. That is a permanent marker year-round. And then this stick in the snow is their less permanent version. This is coming into the checkpoint of Iditarod, which is an abandoned mining community. So this big dark blob, shows a little bit better on my screen, is a broken down building. And then that's some more. So this area had was really big in the gold rush. So there's the village or the town of Iditarod and Flat, and they were some of the reasons that Joe Reddington wanted to create the route, was to memorialize and save this trail that was so important to the gold miners. This is my dog Cajun being goofy. So even when you're dead tired, you got to remember to laugh, and this made me laugh. So the Yukon, oh man, the Yukon. I had heard the Yukon can be challenging, but little did I realize how challenging she can be. So it's 165 miles on a big, wide river that is very temperamental. This year it was rain and overflow. So overflow is where water comes up to the surface and pools on the top of snow. Like I said before, the dogs don't really like water. And what happened was snow machiners would hit a puddle of overflow, create a trail, and then the next one would see the water and go a different way. So there was about 10 different routes through these sections of overflow that all were wet. None of them were good, but my lead dogs couldn't see that. They're down here. They can't see that all these trails have water. So they were trying to weave and out, and they're like, oh, this might be better. Oh, this might be better. So those 165 miles might as well have been 200 because we were just doing this. And their poor heads were just getting fried. So I had planned on doing this in 4 runs, and I think I did it in like 5 runs. I just took more rests because they needed it, which was pretty miserable in the rain. But honestly, I will happily forget this section. But also this section afforded me a great friendship. I teamed up with another musher named Michael. He was struggling with his lead dogs. His lead dogs were young as well, and my lead dogs were starting to falter. So we talked to each other. We're like, hey, we're having some leadership problems, and decided to leapfrog. So he would be in front for a while, then I would be in front. And that really helps when you're having leading problems with your dogs, because then they can just chase. They see a team in front and they're like, oh, we're just going there. So we were able to team up and get down the Yukon a little bit easier that way. And I really appreciated the companionship out there. Just, it's so wide open, and you just feel very desolate, and it was raining, and I don't like rain. So it was just very depressing. But I also had my most enjoyable camp out there. So it's blowing wind, it's storming, it's raining, and I curl up with my dogs on the lee side of the wind of my sled, and I don't want to get up after 3 hours. So it was really hard to get up and keep going, but I knew Caltag, the next checkpoint, was just 30 miles away. So I was able to get up and go. So this is one of the checkpoints along the Yukon River. It's one of the remote ones. It's just a tent city. So it's called Eagle Island. These yellow tents are called Arctic ovens. So they're made for cold weather. So they have a little wood stove in them.
Question for you, Allie.
Yeah.
Reading up, keeping up with everything that was going on, there was a lot of question whether or not any of the supplies would actually make it to Eagle Island in time, but they made it.
Yeah, so Eagle Island is not an established route on the natives' travel. So everything had to be taken there by snow machine this year because flights couldn't happen because the weather was so bad. So bush planes fly by sight. They don't fly by instrumentation. So weather's bad, they can't fly. So the question was whether the snow machiners could get there, but they also created our gnarly overflow situation. But I was happy to have my resupply in Eagle Island. So these are some of the mountains you start seeing as you reach the northern end. Just kind of shows how, doesn't quite show how vast it is, but that's still on the river. And Caltag is just around that point. This is in Caltag. It's one of the native villages, and one of the first places I was able to, well, I needed to dry out after the rain and the overflow, so I spent a lot of time there drying out gear. And there was more trail kindness for me there. It was incredible to see like how giving everyone was. My boots were soaking wet, and every time you put them on means you're taking them away from the wood stove that's drying them. So I went to a checker and was like, hey, is there any way I can purchase a pair of shoes here? And that checker went out of their way. They asked a local who gave me a pair of shoes to borrow, and then when I went to leave, she gave me her shoes. And I was able to use her shoes as a second pair of boots the whole way to Nome. The trail from Caltag to Eunuch was phenomenal. It was really pretty. It's mountainous, and it's also a historic trail. The natives have been using it for hundreds of years as a trade route. So it's a well-established trail that, after slogging through the Yukon, felt like a freaking highway. So I really enjoyed this section of trail. I was traveling with 3 other mushers, but I also saw, so this is a cabin I stayed at halfway. It's called Old Woman, and when I got there, there was a musher that his team no longer wanted to go. So it was kind of a reality check for me of what could happen if I wasn't careful and if I wasn't in tune with my team. So what had happened to him was he only had 1 lead dog, and he had to return that lead dog for injury or exhaustion. And my dogs were doing great, but it's really easy to have them go downhill. So it's kind of a reality check of just to keep aware. But you can see my dogs are pretty happy. So that's Quahog and Rambler up front that time. So the coast. I think the coast was incredible. It was very challenging, just because it was so hilly. I've never run so much behind a dog team in my life, so definitely kept me in shape. So Eunuch to Shaktoolik, you go over what's called the Blueberry Hills. I did it at night, which was a great choice. I got to see the Northern Lights. That was the only time I saw the Northern Lights on the trail, just because it was so stormy. And my dogs rocked that run. It felt really good to see that they were doing so well, even after all this time. I think that's like 700 miles into the run at this point. So I was passing teams that had left 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes in front of me, and I was passing them like they stood still. So it was kind of a morale boost for me of, I'm sorry I'm passing you, but yay, my dogs look good. The only flat part was crossing the Norton Sound from Shaktoolik to Koyuk, and it looks like this. There's a whole lot of nothing for 50 miles, which is about anywhere from 6 to 9 hours. At this point, you're exhausted. Thankfully, I did it in the daylight, and it wasn't just all pitch black, because that is the hardest time to stay awake. But I still had to come up with ways to stay awake. I sang my dogs old rock songs all the way across. My favorites were Queen and The Who.
So you didn't try I Spy?
Nope, there's not a lot to spy out there. I did see some ravens, and I saw a fox. I don't know what the fox was doing out that far, but I saw a fox.
I feel like it was supporting you.
Yeah. So
He's in a pouch.
he's in the bag. So that's Quahog. This was definitely a downturn for me as we were crossing the Norton Sound. One of my main lead dogs, Quahog, stopped pulling, and he didn't eat his trail snack. And that is one of the biggest red flags you can get as a musher. There was something going on with him. So immediately I got him in the bag. He looked good in the bag. He was happy. He was smiling. But I knew he wasn't happy running on the team. So he got to run in the sled for the last 15 miles going into the next checkpoint. Whereupon I had the vets immediately check him. All they could find was that he was dehydrated and a little bit anemic, which if, I don't know if anybody knows, but the way you check if they're anemic is you check their gums. So his gums were almost white, and that's not good. So he rested with the team, and I took care of him with the team, but I knew he was going to be staying behind. He still wasn't eating, which isn't good when they're anemic. So I pulled out an old dog mushing trick, which is use some cat food. So I poured a bunch of cat food on the top of his meal, and he was like, oh, this is great, and he ate everything. So that made me feel a little bit better, but he still stayed behind. And the vet I left him with said I would never see him again because she was going to steal him from me, and I was like, I got to see him again. But he was probably the hardest dog I had to leave behind. I only left 3, and I cried when I left him behind. He's my main boy. He gives me kisses, and I didn't want to see him leave, but it was for his best.
How was he now?
He's doing great. By the time I got home, he was like, hey, how you doing? Yeah, what took you so long to get here? So at this point, I'm down to 12 dogs, and I'm starting to get a little nervous because I only have 3 lead dogs. I had been running most of the race with 4 lead dogs. Most of my lead dogs I would not consider super strong, and so I was doing what's called rotating them constantly. So every time I stopped, I put a new lead dog up front, and that just gives them a mental break. So I was down to 3. So that means there's a dog that has to run 2 runs in a row. So I was getting a little nervous. I still had 250 miles to go, and that's a long way. That's, what is that, at least 5 runs. And I had heard a lot of bad things about the coast. It's usually really windy, and usually the trail's really windblown, which can be difficult for a leader because they're having to pick the trail because they can't find it as easily. So with trepidation, I left Koyuk, headed back out in the sea ice, and immediately climbed another hill. So you can see the hill in the distance on that first one. And I passed a bunch of fat tire bikers. So there's it's called the Iditarod Invitational race, where I think they bike and ski. So you think I'm crazy. I think they're crazy. So they run the same distance as us, but they're biking and skiing. So I passed a bunch of them on that hill, and I nodded at them. I wished them luck and whistled my dogs up and flew up that hill while they walked their bikes up. So that run is Koyuk to Elam, the top right there. So you go up and over a hill, and then you'll see like a river delta. Yep. It's got the blue. You come down the hills, and that river delta, gosh, it had to have taken me 3 hours to cross that delta. It was windblown, it was blowing, and it was hot. So the sun was beating down on us. So the dogs were overheating. The wind was blowing in their face, and the trail was soft. So we were going 6 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour, and I couldn't stay awake. So I slept a lot in that section, unfortunately. It's not the best thing, but so it goes. So when you fall asleep on your sled, it's really scary because anything could happen. I mean, you're asleep. They could take off, a dog could get tangled up and hurt, or you could fall off and lose your team. So I'm fighting with everything I got. I try the singing trick again, doesn't help. I try listening to a story on my iPod. That puts me to sleep even faster. I try running alongside. I just fall in the snow, and the dogs are like, what are you doing? You're just slowing us down more. So I ended up just so it goes. But made it to Elam without problems, and my favorite person in the whole world on the trail was there. She was what's called a race judge, so they're along there just to make sure that everything's being played according to the rules. And she was an extremely important person to me. Her name's Karin. Every time I saw her, so I saw her in Nikolai and Takatna, and then now in Elam, she'd be like, "You look great, your dogs look great, you're doing awesome, you're gonna get to know 'em." So just those simple statements. You go from down here to way up here. So I had just come across this delta that crawling at 6 miles an hour, and she's like, "Yay! The sun is shining, everything is good." So I think the biggest challenge for me on Iditarod was just all the ups and downs. You could be having the best time of your life, and then the next hour you're at your lowest low. So when you find somebody that can pick you up from a low, it's really nice. The end. At this point, I'm sad to say I was ready to reach Nome. I've heard lots of stories of mushers on this section wanting to just head back, but I was very happy to be on the last stretch. I had battled a head cold on the Yukon River, and then in Elam I caught another bug, a less pleasant bug. Yeah, so I was ready to see Nome and get the dogs to a warm, not windy place, because it had been blowing wind the entire way. So leaving White Mountain, I asked the checkers, "Hey, what's the trail like up ahead?" And they're like, "Oh, it should be good. The weather's supposed to be calm. It's supposed to be good weather." And then there's an infamous part. So you go up and over the Topcock Mountains, and then you drop down onto the coast. And when you drop down, there's a section that for some reason the wind gets channeled through the mountains, and the wind comes from inland out to sea, and it's called the blowhole. People have gotten stuck and had to scratch in that section time and time again, almost every year. Cindy Galea this year had to scratch in that section. So I asked, "How's the blowhole?" And they're like, "Oh, it's not supposed to be blowing today." I'm like, "Terrific! I'm gonna have a good run." I go to leave, almost immediately, 55 miles, going 40 miles an hour. Uh-oh. Let's see, come on. It's not working. Uh-oh. We're going about 6-7 miles an hour because so wind drifts the snow and makes it really hard for the dogs to run through. So when a dog team is moving really well at a trot, it's 8 to 10 miles an hour. We're probably going about 6 to 7 miles an hour in that video. So, and again, more whiteout conditions. But in the spirit of lightness, we're going through the Topcock Mountains, and we start up a little flock of ptarmigan. So ptarmigan are a grouse bird that live in Alaska. They're about this big. All my dogs are like, "Yay!" I have a dog named Twister. She's like, "I'm gonna eat that bird." She leaps up in the air. I swear she got the tail of that bird, because see a little feather come down. She's looking at me like, "But let's go hunt the ptarmigan." And she's caught ptarmigan before in training, so she knows how good they taste. I wish safety looked like that when I got there. So there's a checkpoint of safety that is 22 miles from the finish. Almost nobody stops there because they're 22 miles from the finish. But it's a little beacon telling you you're almost there. It's a really cool little stretch. You're on a spit that sticks out in the ocean, and it's just like all these lines of fishing camps all the way down the spit. And My dogs did great. I was expecting them to see it and think it was a checkpoint and want to stop, but I told them, all right. Down the trail they went. And we had already gone 55 miles at this point, which is about the max we had been running. So it was a really incredible feeling to see that even though we were 955 miles into a race at their max, they still got up and they still happily went.
Went all the way through to no.
So all that water is normally frozen that time of year. About a week before the front runners came, a big storm blew through and pushed all the ice back out to sea. And I talked to a local and they said that that was typical of May weather, that happened in May, and it was happening in March. This impacts the locals because they use the sea ice to go fishing, crabbing. They lost all their crabbing and fishing gear that they have out on the ice, and they lost their income and their food source. Whether it's climate change or not, it's up to you to decide. Nome! Before I got to Nome, though, I had to climb one more hill. I hated that hill. It's called Cape Nome. And they could have taken us around it. Easily could have taken us around it. There's a road that goes around it. They took us over it. And I had heard stories of how mushers are like, yeah, it's terrible. It's awful. And I was like, oh, whatever, it'll be fine. It was a long hill. But we got up and over it, and if you were following along, there was a woman named Sarah Stokey that had a really tough run from Elam all the way into Nome, and I passed her on Cape Nome, and we tried to get her team. Her team didn't have any dogs that wanted to lead anymore, and so we tried to get her to chase my team. They didn't want to go, and I didn't want to risk my dogs crashing mentally, so I had to keep going, and it was really hard to leave a fellow musher behind, but you gotta weigh your safety, and I knew that at the very least she was only 7 miles from Nome, so her safety wasn't at risk. So it was a really hard decision to make, but okay. So this is me coming into the starting chute in Nome. It's snowing, of course. And right here, let's see, right here, my lead dog decides to go to the bathroom. No, parrot. And normally the dogs are really good at going to the bathroom on the run, but at this point, one dog stops to go to the bathroom. They're like, oh, break time. They don't know this is the end. They're also seeing lots of screaming people, and there's a big funnel, and they're like, no, we don't really want to go down there.
Wait, who's laying down?
I don't know. There you go.
It was your birthday, wasn't it, Al?
I had my birthday while I was in the checkpoint of Iditarod. Yay! Thankfully, they don't make us wear the bib the whole way. Otherwise, I probably would have thrown it in the bottom of my sled and forgotten about it. But so yay, I reached Nome. I really love those two dogs. So I ended up having to drop the third lead dog in White Mountain. So those two dogs led me for the last 150 miles. So remember how I was telling you I was rotating them after like every 40 miles? So we got Rambler on your left and Parrot on your right. Rambler was a gift from my boss. He's one of his main race lead dogs, and Linwood decided right before the race that he was going to lend him to me, and he definitely saved me out there. So I was incredibly grateful to have him. Let's see. So in Nome, they get to hang out for a little bit before you fly them home. So thankfully they don't have to run home. So we ship them home via air cargo. And then on the other side, you have someone pick them up and take care of them. I'm lucky enough that I'm part of a kennel that has a whole crew to receive them that are used to taking care of dogs when they get back from Iditarod. So they got pampered when they went home. And then I got to follow a day later. So biggest thing I learned was to reach Nome is to win. I wasn't going into the race trying to win, but it is a race, and so there's always a little bit of pressure to perform. So I felt bad when I would slow down or take too long to get out of a checkpoint. But at the end of the day, I made it to Nome, and that's what matters. The other really big thing that struck me was just all the trail kindness that happens out there, not just for me, but for everybody else. So if you were following the race, you saw this guy is actually my boss. His name's Linwood Fiedler. He hit a different stump, and his carabiner broke. So we used carabiners to attach the sled to the gang line. And that carabiner broke, and his 14-dog line took off without him. That's extremely scary for a dog musher. Anything can happen. And generally, when you lose your team like that, a dog is going to die. So he was walking down the trail crying, expecting the worst. When along comes one of his friends, Mats Pedersen, who, without question, hooked his sled to Linwood's sled and hauled 2 fully loaded race sleds that weighed 200 pounds each, 2 fully grown men, through an extremely rough patch of trail that had just ice and snow, or ice and dirt, for, I don't know, I can't remember how far it was, but it was really far. So he's taking a toll on his dogs to help his friend out. And there's not many other sporting events where they would pick up a competitor like that. And they're both competing. They're both trying to do really well in this race. No questions asked. When I asked Linwood at the end, he was like, yeah, we spoke like 5 words to each other the entire time. There was no questions, no I don't knows.
Did he find his dogs?
Yep, so they went. And the way Linwood tells it is they were going down, and he shines his light down the river, and he sees a bunch of trail markers, and he's like, there shouldn't be any trail markers down. So trail markers have reflectors on it. So he's like, there shouldn't be reflectors down there. So he asks Mats to stop, and he walks down there, and it's his dogs. And they're all tangled up, but all fine. Yep. He said it took a little bit out of him because when they don't have a sled slowing them down, they go full speed. And that's why it's so dangerous, is because if they're going full speed and a dog trips, there's nothing to stop them, and then they can get drugged, or they can get tangled, or they can get wrapped up in a line. And that's what a biggest job of the musher is: keep the line strung out, keep the lines untangled, and slow down and stop if a dog gets tangled. So he was extremely lucky both for his dogs and that someone was willing to stop and help him. I told you a little bit of the trail kindness I experienced, so I got 2 people that lent me their sleds, no question asked. I had someone lend me their boots. I had that amazing race judge that every time I saw her was just like, woohoo! And then I had the amazing people I was traveling with the whole way. They all were veterans. When I was down and I went to them, I'd be like, for the most part, I was going to them, my dogs aren't eating well. And they're like, well, have you tried this? You can try that. Anya gave me the cat food. And they just were really inspirational. They're like, you can do this. This is what the trail looks like. Just one step at a time. Just think about the next stop. Don't think too far ahead. It's too big. It's too big. Just think the next step. So I was really incredibly lucky that I was out there with such a supportive musher group and support group. So these are some of the things I learned from the trail.
Bring more toilet paper.
Yep. So staying in the moment. Sometimes you can get too focused on the future and everything seems a little bit hopeless and a little bit unattainable. 1,000 miles across Alaska. Seems very unattainable. So if you just stay in the moment, I was telling Sean and Mary at the start, I'm just going to Yetna. Yep. And that was my mantra, but it's one thing saying that, it's another thing living that. So the whole way, it was just like, just going to the next place, just going to the next place. The only time I struggled with that was the Yukon. It was just so miserable that the moment was worse than the future. So I started thinking about the future too much. But then I just looked at my dogs who were getting through this incredibly terrible trail. And they were going. And it was just like, if they can keep going, I can keep going. So that kind of segues into the next one, which is just keeping a positive attitude no matter what. I mean, that trail tried to throw almost every single thing it possibly could at me. And it's really easy to get so focused in on, well, now it's raining. Well, now there's overflow. Well, now there's another mountain to climb. Well, now it's blowing 40 miles an hour. That it's just like a downward slide unless you're just like, it's okay. My dogs are happy. They're running. They're still kissing my face. Life is good. The other thing is, mainly the sled taught me this, is no matter what, there is a solution. You just got to look around and you just got to find it. So don't ever give up. There's always going to be a solution, no matter how hard and how insurmountable it feels like it is. The dogs are my heroes. That's the other thing I learned. These guys are incredible. The trust that they put into me. It's just like, it's an amazing feeling to think that these dogs trust you so much that they get up and go when you say go, even after running 100 miles a day. They love it, but they're tired. I mean, I love it, but I was tired and I was ready to go home, but they're still going. And that gave me the strength to continue even when I just wanted to curl up and go back to sleep. Yes, bring more toilet paper. No more needed to say. Also bring rain gear. Alaska likes to throw everything at you, and she sure did this year. I didn't use my parka once. It stayed in the bottom of my sled, and I was wishing I had rain gear the whole way, which means I should have trusted the weatherman because I knew that was going to happen, and yet I still brought the parka and not the raincoat. Yeah. Kind of riding the roller coaster styles a little bit with staying in the moment and staying positive, and getting one shower in 2 weeks would have been nice.
Please tell me you had deodorant.
No.
You're gonna do it again next year, aren't you?
Nope. No, I'd like to say I could, but the biggest one of the things I came out of Iditarod with is I never want to do this again with somebody else's dogs, and that's because I'm struggling so much to say goodbye to these dogs that I just formed such a special and close relationship with, and now I have to say goodbye to them, and it's just tearing me apart. And I don't want to ever do that again to them or to me, because it's just as much on them. They don't know anybody else besides me. Nobody else has ever run them, and now they're going to have to transition to somebody else, and I think that's just as terrible as for me. So.
Is that always the case, Alan?
So Linwood, the guy who owns them, and they'll transition over to him, and they'll rebond with him So in the end, it's okay for them, but it will be a transition period. But I think it's going to be harder on me than for them. Because at the end of the day, you fed me, you pet my head, you're running me, I love you. So, but.
So they're in Alaska and you're in Ohio now? Where are you? Yeah.
No, I live in Alaska full time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just transitioning to trying to figure out a way to build my own kennel so I can form a bond with my own team.
Thank you for your story. I'm sure there are questions for Allie, but Claire has something to say or do first. Yeah.
There was a bib just like this being auctioned, and one of our alumni bought it. Unfortunately, as of today, she's still calling to see where it was, and it hasn't gotten to Sweet Briar yet. But this bib, like this, she signed it and she drew a vixen head on it, if you've seen it on Facebook. But this will be framed along with whatever picture you choose. We, of course, take the Vogue picture, it's pretty neat, but whatever picture you choose, but we want it to be a symbol for our students, perseverance and tenacity. So, you got real joy.
So I got almost all the mushers that ran with me to sign this, so it's pretty cool.
Very cool. So we have time for a couple of questions in here, and then we have a little bit of a reception in there, and people will have a chance to talk individually to Allie. But so a couple of questions now.
Please ask questions.
How long does it take to enter a dog into a sled like this?
Like how long it takes to train? So it's an iterative process. They are working animals, so this is what we're trying to teach them from day one. We're breeding our own dogs, and we have that in mind to start with. They get typical training when they're puppies, just like you would with a pet dog, but they're getting harness trained by the time they're 6 to 10 months old, just getting used to harness. And usually by the time they're 10 months old to a year old, we start introducing pulling. And then their first winter, so usually that time when they're just a little bit over a year old, they start just learning how to run on a team and pull a sled. So that first winter is super relaxed, and then usually that next winter is when we start doing a little bit of conditioning training, so they learn, their muscles start learning how to run longer miles, and they mentally learn how to run longer miles. And longer miles is 20 miles. So that's their second winter. Third winter is when we'll start doing shorter races with them. And if they're doing really good with that, we'll enter them in mid-distance racing. So it's like 200 to 300 miles. And usually by the time they're 4 years old, they're pretty ready to do longer racing.
What's the oldest dog that's been in a race?
Linwood finished with a 10-year-old dog, 10 or 11-year-old dog on his team one year.
Oh.
Yeah, but he's the granddad and the dad of most of the dogs in that kennel, so he's a pretty phenomenal dog. His name is Happy Jack. He's a happy boy.
Yeah.
But he's like 14 now, and it's really sad because he's like so energetic still, and he's just like, my body's old. Yeah. So he ran on a group of dogs that we called, Sean was asking, he's on a group of dogs that we call the old man team, so they go like 3 miles 3 times a week.
One of the objectives on your slideshow was not to be competitive, but to establish a name for yourself as having a happy and productive team. Are you able to use that as like a foothold to establishing your kennel? Were you able to make any connections that way?
I think it's more just finishing Iditarod does that for you in Alaska. You kind of proven yourself that you're capable of caring for a team well enough that they want to and are able to finish Iditarod. If you go and look, there's teams that have to do what's called scratching, and usually that's because the dogs either got too tired or they had to drop too many dogs from their team that they aren't able to safely continue. So
Allie, if you're able to establish your own kennel, when you decide to do the Iditarod again, what's the approximate cost for that training and the drops and your entry fees?
Well, just doing it without owning the home kennel is like 10 to 15 grand. Caring for a kennel would probably depend on how many dogs you're managing, but it's typically about $2 a day just to feed the dogs.
Each dog?
Each dog, yep.
Silly question, skin care along the route. How did you take care of it?
I didn't. I came in with terrible windburn.
Yeah.
Like I still have a little remnants.
Protective stuff.
I brought it. I just was too tired to bother to put it on.
Did you find that it got red? Stop laughing at me.
No, I was super sunburnt and redburnt. I was super sunburnt and windburnt. Like it was pretty bad.
So like what the football players do with the black, was that what do other people do too?
Well, normally when it's cold, you're wearing what's called a neck gaiter, which
Yeah.
would protect you a little bit. But it was so hot, I couldn't keep it up because it was
steam.
steam wasn't so much a problem. It's just it's so warm you overheat really easily. I had a thinner one. They're called buffs. Have you heard of those? So I was able to utilize that a little bit, but.
Rhina, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering while you're on the trail, what kind of communication do you have? Do you have any communication with the world
No, so it's
in case of emergency?
completely remote, and it's actually really cool. The last, I think, early 2000s, up until the early 2000s, they were still using like ham operators to communicate on the logistic sides of the race, and it was only with the advent of some more durable technology, and don't ask me, I don't know. I just know that there's something that switched, and they were able to outfit us with GPS devices, so that's how you're able to track us. And then there's also one that if we were to get in danger that we could press, it's like an SOS button. So they outfit every sled with those two units. So that's really the extent. And then every checkpoint you can talk to the people there, and you can like theoretically hear about what's going on in the world, but I didn't really want to hear about anything going on in the world. They changed the rule 2 years ago that you can make an outside call if you want. It used to be that you weren't allowed to. And some people utilize that. They would use like a sat phone to call home, but
You did have something in case of emergency to push down.
yeah, there it was. Yeah.
What's the protein that you fed your dog? What protein level and fat level in the food? You said it's very high protein.
So we feed two different types of beef blends. The one is called High Pro, the one is called Power. I'm blanking on the percentage, but I know the Power is higher in fat and the High Pro is higher in the protein level. I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers of it, but I know they didn't want to eat the Power on this race.
Well,
She's a dog woman for sure.
Let's thank Alison, and I hope people will join Alison